You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network. This is Talking Headways, a weekly podcast about sustainable transportation and urban design. I'm Jeff Wood. This week on the podcast, we're back at the Rail Volution conference in Miami last fall. We chat with Commissioner Eileen Higgins about the South Dade Busway, the importance of FTA ratings in getting projects built, and why she thinks it's important as an elected official to ride transit. Stay with us. Today's podcast was produced in partnership with MPact. The call for speakers is now open for the 2023 MPact Transit Plus Community Conference, formerly known as Rail Volution. We're looking for proposals that address hot topics and trends in transit, mobility and development, and proposals that showcase how to do projects really well. We want to know not only what, but so what. The deadline to submit is March 31st. Find the information at impactmobility.org/speakers. That's the letter M, PACT, mobility.org/speakers. Today's podcast is brought to you by our wonderful Patreon supporters, past, present, and future. We really can't thank you all enough for the support, whether you've supported for a month or over 5 years. Join this merry band of infrastructure nerds and zoning wizards and support Talking Headways and Mondays at the Overhead Wire. $2 a month gets you stickers, including our Cars Are Cholesterol sticker, and a handwritten note. $10 a month gets you one of our transportation scarves. Thanks everyone from the advocates to the bus drivers that support this show. Go to patreon.com/theoverheadwire to support. That's patreon.com/theoverheadwire. You can also get our transportation scarves, sign up for our daily newsletter started in 2006, or get our audiobook version of Raymond Unwin's Town Planning and Practice by going to theoverheadwire.com. Also, in the show notes, you'll find links to the bookshop.org affiliate store and link to purchase some of our Cars Are Cholesterol merch designed with the great help of Richard Wazensky. Follow him on Instagram at DickDavidSketches if you get a chance. Thanks for all your support, and we look forward to sharing with you what's next.
Well, Commissioner Higgins, it's so great to be able to speak with you. You know, one of the first things I usually ask people on my podcast is like how they came to transportation. Like, what is it that actually got you interested in the subject? Was it something like riding the train when you were a kid, or was it something that you came to when you were older?
I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which, as you might imagine, is not exactly a heavy rail kind of subway sort of town. And so it was all car-centered. But my parents had grown up in the Bronx. And so every time we would go visit my grandmother, it was just perfectly normal that you could be this little child and you could be on the subway and it was perfectly fine, or hop on the bus and go across town. So I definitely, even as a young person, learned about transit. But quite frankly, I became a transit person as a grown-up. I ended up living in places where having a car is ridiculous, right? It's too expensive. You can't afford the insurance. You can't pay to park. And so whether that was Washington, D.C., New York City, Mexico City, and others, I just became used to riding transit. And then I moved to Miami, and I just kept riding transit. And, you know, it's not the most convenient thing in the world. Like, I'm not going to tell you we have the best transit system in the world, because we don't, but we plan to, because we're going to build it. We've got a number of, 5 extensions, including the one we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, the South Corridor under construction. But I ride transit for a couple reasons. One, I feel like it connects me to place. When I'm in a car, I pay attention to nothing except not killing people, right? Like, do you know what I mean? I emerge stressed and miserable because fundamentally, there is nowhere you can go in our county where you're not in a traffic jam, right? So driving is never pleasant. It's always horrible. So these people that go, why would you take the bus? I'm like, well, you're miserable and I'm not miserable. What do you mean? I have my monthly pass. It costs me virtually nothing. I read. I call my mom. I do whatever I want. Now on some of our new vehicles, we have free Wi-Fi. It can even work. So that's actually a downgrade in my quality of life. But transit is a much better way of living as long as it can get you where you want to go. And as a result of kind of my being an experiential rider here, I ran for the county commission because I didn't see there was literally no one on the county commission that had ever been on one of our buses, right? They just had no idea what was going on. And very few of them ever got on the train system. And I thought, well, I'm not a transit person. Like, you all people are experts, right? Who's here a transit engineer or a traffic engineer? Well, I'm not. I'm just a person who rides a bus and the train. But I knew I couldn't be worse at transportation policy than people that don't ride public transportation. And I just made it a mission to become a subject matter expert. And I'm still not as good as many of you in this room, but I'm getting close to where, I can testify in front of Congress and I can make sure we get the money we need to expand these things, because transportation is so important. What I always talk about is there's 3 basic things. It's kind of like my Maslow's hierarchy of needs, except there's too many bloody things in that pyramid. There's 3 things that matter fundamentally to our families, right? 1 is, can they afford where they live? What's going on with the price of housing? 2, transportation. Huge cost burden, right? $500-$600 a month if you need a car with insurance. We have outrageous insurance rates here. So can you afford to live where you are? Can you get where you need to go? And then, do you make a decent living? Do you have a job that pays you decent wages with decent benefits? And I believe if we improve any one of these 3 things, we are fundamentally improving people's quality of life. So transportation matters dramatically, particularly low-income families. Our bus system here, 70% of our transit riders are on the bus, right? So who's here ridden our little Metro Mover while you've been here? Okay, so see, it's fun, it's cute, but you ride our buses, you go out and you ride the 11 bus, everybody on that bus is a working person that probably has a service sector job that probably pays them less than $20 an hour. They literally can't afford a car. They can't afford parking. So for me, it's just this passion point that I believe transportation lifts people out of poverty. And so I work on it.
I mean, I think it's rare for public officials to ride transit, unfortunately. And so I'm wondering how that helps you and your discussions when you're talking about policy with some of your other commissioners or, other government officials.
First of all, I know the system. Sometimes I even ride routes that I normally wouldn't ride just because I want to have eyes on the system. So it's not just enabling me to speak more cogently about it with my fellow elected commissioners. Quite frankly, I hope there's no one from the Department of Transportation and Public Works in the room. See, okay, we see. You know where I'm going with this, that Marie knows. I can keep my eyes on the department, right? They can't get away with anything because I know what's going on. Like, I know if the Metro Mover isn't having the reliability that it's getting. And that enables me to ask for solutions. And then also, quite frankly, like our Metro Mover system, which you all rode. Did you like it? Okay, great. It breaks down a lot because it's a little old. We have a control system that's more than 40 years old. It's kind of like knob twisting binary, And so we are spending over $150 million to upgrade that control system, which is a great project. It's like open heart surgery, really, on the mover. You got to lift our baby cars off the tracks and, open the tracks up and open our cars up. But that's going to improve reliability. And I'm able to better advocate for that because I actually ride the mover and I've been delayed because of the mover backline. So it helps both ways. It helps watch over what the department's doing and it helps me better advocate for change.
So let's talk about the South Dade Busway. It's a 20-mile line with 14 stations and expected to be opened in 2024. Where did the idea for the line come from? And can you tell us a little bit about the area that it runs through?
Yeah, well, let me start with place. Miami-Dade County is big. It's ginormous. Geographically, we're actually larger than 2 states, to give you kind of a sense of scale. The southernmost town in our county is Florida City. The residents of Florida City, 40% of them live in poverty. It's our poorest town, but it's also 40 miles away from where we are now, which is where most of the jobs are. So those folks right now have bus service. It's their only way to kind of begin to connect to the Metro Rail system. And if you get up and you leave your home in Florida City, you arrive downtown 2 hours later, one way. So the lack of transportation is literally keeping an entire town in poverty, right? And then we go a little further north, a smidge closer, right? Now you probably cut 15 minutes off the commute, you arrive in Homestead. But these folks are still dramatically far away from jobs and economic opportunity. They're spending 4 hours a day commuting if they want to come to a high-paying job in our big hubs. So as with all transportation projects, we study and we study and we study and we study, see? And so we get them. And actually, so we have a lot of people that make a business out of studying these things. But obviously, we were hoping to build a train, right? Because that's what everybody wants. In the minds of the consumer, right, the rider, our customer, somehow train is better than bus. But the economics of it didn't work out. We knew we would not have the ridership to get a medium high or high rating out of our friends at FTA. And I knew that FTA has not funded a medium rated project in the entire history of the agency. So if we got a low rating, we would never get our project funded. And FTA, God bless them, they have a ton of work and a ton of communities, but it takes forever to get a rating. We might not even get a rating for 5 years on a train project. So they have this other alternative called small starts, which if your project is under $300 million, now $400 million, you get a quick approval and you get a quick funding. And so we really looked at the study. We looked at what does it cost for building a train and the timeline for that, and what would it cost to build a world-class gold standard bus rapid transit system. And we will have our BRT world-class system open before FTA would have even rated a train project. Okay, so that's how much competition there is for the new starts, these big multi-billion-dollar projects. And a lot of this calculus is before the infrastructure bill. Hallelujah, thank you for that. So it's a great system. What I just told you about the lives of the folks in Florida City trying to get to work. Each way, they will save 45 minutes. That's an hour and a half every single day the minute our bus rapid transit system opens. So this is a meaningful project that's going to transform economic opportunity for tens of thousands of low-income residents.
You mentioned that $100 million from the Small Starts program. Did you have to change any processes to get that money? Is there anything that needed to happen in order to get that funding?
You have to be careful because the cap at the time was $300,000. So you can't just ask for $300,000. They don't like it if at the end of the day you spend $310,000. They feel like you're cheating, right? Okay, Janet is nodding. So you have to be really sure you can do it for that, which probably means you need to have this contingency in where your project is $280 million, more or less. So you have to be very sure of your number because they don't want you to apply for a small starts rather than new starts.
You mean $300 million?
$300 million, yeah, sorry.
I was like, wow, that's a really cheap transit project.
If only. So we had to be very careful about that. We had to make sure we could do that. And that meant we found other sources of fundings for things like our park and rides. Because when you are building bus rapid transit in areas that are a little more suburban, some folks are going to drive to the park and ride. And so we did have to make sure that we're building the busway, we're doing the vehicles, all that's the $300 million. But the connectivity, the first last mile stuff, we've gotten some other funds from the state. We have some of our own funds and our park and rides. And then we also have some pretty robust zoning called rapid transit zoning, where developers get some additional density by being close to transit. And in exchange for that, they help us with some of the connectivity, some of that first last mile. Like, for example, part of first last mile is just trees, right? You know, when you're trying to go to transit, your first encounter with transit occurs in a pair of sneakers on a sidewalk. So if the sidewalks suck and there's no trees and all of this, so we are really making sure we're also bringing some private sector funds into that as well.
Last time we chatted about a month ago, you gave me a really good quote, and I wanted to get more of your thoughts on it. You said the impact of no TOD over 40 years is a low FTA rating.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're competing for funding with all these other cities, how much does past land use affect your competitive edge?
So I think past land use, essentially, if you don't build density around transit, or even your ideas for transit of where it will be. So I'll give you an example. We have a North Corridor project. We have already created the zoning to build incredibly dense areas that funnel down, right? Lots of density near the station, and then they go down as we go further and further away. But we put that in place. We have not even yet applied to FTA for funding on that. They're going to get our application, and it's probably going to be for a lot of money, like over $1 billion. I hope they're listening. But I know we have got to be able to prove that we can get the ridership. And the way you get ridership is land use policies. So, and I go to these public meetings, right? And you have these residents, well, I need a single family home. And I'm like, okay, well, that's nice. You could have that. And then they're like, and I want a train. I'm like, well, you could have that, but you can't have both of those things. They're completely incompatible. So if you want to be stuck in traffic for the rest of your life and not have anyone that lives in a condo or an apartment anywhere near you, well, okay, You're stuck in traffic in a single family home. God bless you. A lot of people love that. That's their path to happiness. But if you want a train, you're going to have to consider having people like me. By the way, I'm a very good neighbor. I don't drive. I don't make any noise. Right? That lives in a condo building. But they imagine people in apartments as these like evil whatever. I don't know. I mean, this is it. This is what people who live in apartments look like. But it's this balance and it's change. You got to remember all of this is about change. Like when people buy their home or move into their neighborhood, they think it's like that forever. And so having to be sensitive about that and in some ways doing gradual land use. But I think our commission is pretty united at the county level. Sometimes we fuss with our municipalities, but at the county level, we've basically said we're going to build transit. It's our only solution. We literally cannot find space for another highway, right? I see. Okay, Marie is nodding, so she knows every nook and cranny in the county where we could possibly put a highway. They don't exist. We only can build transit, but we're never going to get any federal money if we don't put the land use policies in to build transit-oriented communities near those stations. And so the county's been, and bear in mind, it's taken a long time and a lot of compromise, but I bet we have some of the best land use around transit policies now in the United States of America. I don't know. I mean, I toss that out there as a challenge.
Well, tell me more about that, like the RTZs and how they're controlled and how that works along, say, the South Busway.
Yeah. So on our South Dade corridor, if you're near a transit, and bear in mind, we're not going to build a 50-story building down there, but we are able to build 8-story multifamily units around the station. And then you slowly but surely go down to, duplexes and then to single family in the area. We're also making sure that our zoning allows for commercial use, right? Because we're talking right now about getting folks from far away to come here. My ultimate dream is that there's jobs there. And so we are also allowing commercial in this. So it's not just multifamily, it can be mixed use. We have created in our rapid transit zoning different requirements than we might in our single family neighborhoods for things like bike share, micromobility options, Uber and Lyft drop-offs, right? So that you're not, literally taking up a lane of our roads for crazy people getting in and out. You know how this goes. Let's learn from mymistakes.com. Who approved this building with no Uber and Lyft drop off? So we have put in some pretty tight options. We also are requiring that a minimum of 12.5% of the units be workforce and affordable housing. And then there are additional density bonuses should a private developer put in more workforce housing for that.
Now, the RTZs, are they controlled by the municipalities? Or who controls what the zoning is?
So under state law, which I don't know if other states have this, but because these transportation systems are under the control of the county, we do have the ability to control the zoning at the county level. We work very hard to be compatible with our municipalities, right? Which doesn't mean we always agree, right? Because if you only want single family homes next to a station, well, we're not going to be able to agree with that. But we certainly have different designations. We have like big urban centers. You're in one of those big urban centers. Guess what? I have unlimited height. Until the FAA tells me you can't build that building, it's too high because our airplanes can run into them. That's like, we can build high.
I've noticed the airplanes get real close.
They get very close. But the FAA has said this is fine, so don't blame us. And the pilots know what they're doing. So, but as we go further afield, you'll see that it's density, but it's not deep density, right? And I think you're sort of seeing on the screen, I just had a background. You see that apartment building there? That might be, and by the way, that's all affordable. That's one of our large affordable housing complexes. That gives you a sense of what the densest of the densest might look like as we get near a station that is, closer to where we would have more suburban type atmospheres. So we try to tone it down based on neighborhood, but we make sure that more than one person lives next to the station.
When did development start happening on the South Busway? I mean, the process, I think, for planning started in 2017 or so.
So I would say the development on the South Dade corridor happened the minute we got the $100 million investment from the feds. And that is why an investment in transportation is so important. Because right now, if you go down there, you can see we've got a mock-up of one of our stations look like, but we're at 60%. I'm pretty sure it's 60%. I hope I'm not overcommitting it. Okay, I see a nod. We're at 60% completion. See, okay, I have a lifeline here in our in our audience. Everybody can fact check me. We're at 60% completion, on the construction of our South Dade corridor. So you can go down, you can actually see some of these stations, the arms that are going to go down that are going to make sure traffic doesn't come anywhere near us and all of this. And all the drainage. Bear in mind, it's a huge drainage project, right? Like climate change, it's here. It's not somewhere else. Seas are rising. They're rising now. And so we've had literally, even though it may not look like our stations are built, we dug the whole road up and put all new drainage down in there because everything we build has different resiliency standards than other parts of the country. So the $100 million investment, we literally started to see multifamily housing applications in their zoning department before we even had the design build award met. Like we had the RFP out for who would be designing and building this for us. And we already had property owners saying, I want to build multifamily housing here. And so if you go up and down our stations, you're going to see some of the buildings are already open, by the way. People are actually living in them. Some of them are under construction. Some of them you can see that the fields are done. And I'll give you just my own examples. So one of our stations, the Quail Roost Station, we own some land there, the county, and it's zoned for 1,000 units. And you can see that's what the mock-up of one of those. We're breaking ground on phase 1 as we speak. But could I build 1,000 units of affordable housing an hour and a half away from jobs? Wouldn't have made any sense. But now I can, right? So even the county can add, because, the private sector tends to build market rate unless they're incentivized to do otherwise. But it's the county that's driving the affordable housing construction and the workforce housing construction. But what am I going to do? Build 1,000 units where there are no jobs and no way to get to jobs? Well, guess what? Now there's ways to get to jobs. So it's pretty exciting to see. And this was the best news. One landowner down there said, I'm going to build an office building. That means they're thinking that jobs can go both ways, right? Because now, am I going to take a job in Homestead? Am I really going to commute an hour and 45 minutes? No. But if I can get there in less than an hour and it's a good job, maybe I do go down there. So it's exciting. It's thrilling to see.
And you can read your books. And
I can read my books. I can call my mom and do whatever.
One of the things you also mentioned in one of our previous discussions was kind of how all of this investment, you have $100 million from the feds, you have local match, you have money from the Rescue Act. I always forget the names. There's so many of them.
Yes,
that come
ARPA.
ARPA, yeah. But it's not just a transportation investment, it's a community investment. I think that's a really important point in terms of thinking about all of these things are interconnected. They're all symbiotic in a way.
Yes, and we have the state, too, the state of Florida. Thank you very much, $100 million. So it takes a village. These are expensive projects. But I believe when we open the South Dade corridor, we're expecting that we'll finish construction the end of 2023. But service wouldn't start till early 2024. But we will have many, many people living there and this dramatic opportunity to improve people's lives. So this is super exciting. But transportation, I fundamentally believe, is the catalyst. And I think it's the catalyst for affordable housing, too, because any housing located near transit is less expensive than housing anywhere else because you don't need a car and car insurance and gas and parking and yada, yada, yada. So it's exciting.
Let's talk about the infrastructure bill a little bit. We're coming up on a year anniversary. Have you seen any impacts from that, or is it too early to tell?
No, I think we are seeing impacts. Matter of fact, the U.S. Department of Transportation has become, in my opinion, the most responsive federal agency I've ever seen in my life. I email them in the morning. I get an email back the same day. I'm like, what is going on? Is this the government? Right? They have really, and this, I think it's because they have a mayor who's transformed himself into secretary. And so he knows what it's like to be local government needing customer service from the federal government. And so every area of U.S. Department of Transportation that we've encountered has really been helpful. And I get to see this not only in my role at the county, but in my role as National Association of Counties Transportation Chair. So I even get to see it for the rural communities because we're a big county, right? We have 3 million people. We got 28,000 employees. We can figure out how to apply for federal grants, right? If we can't, we got real problems. We can do it. But if you're a county of 10,000 people and you've got a bridge over a culvert and it's falling apart, or you don't have that bridge, they have a hard time even applying for these federal grants. So the USDOT's literally set up an entire department called Routes. I don't know what it all stands for, but the first R is rural. And it's literally a direct communication for rural counties about how to get technical assistance and how to participate in all of this infrastructure money because we often talk about communities have been left behind, right? And the Reconnecting Communities program is one of what I think is the most important program that's happening at DOT. And of course, we have an application in there that I'm sure is going to be approved. But infrastructure investments destroyed communities in the urban areas, right? The Cross Bronx Expressway destroyed the South Bronx, right? With Cleveland destroyed. There's a list of places. And mostly they destroyed black neighborhoods. Like, let's just be clear. This is a racist, horrible policy. And they just built these highways and destroyed these thriving areas. And we have one of those neighborhoods, Overtown, totally destroyed. I made a film about it. If you want to see it, let me know. A little 7-minute film. Because the people who literally had their homes bulldozed are still alive. We bulldozed people's homes to build a highway for no good reason, because there was plenty of other places to build the highway where we did not have to destroy people's lives. So reconnecting communities is really, really cool. But rural communities are left behind too. And so part of this equity piece in the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that I'm really impressed with is how DOT is making sure that, for example, rural bus routes. I got the opportunity to visit Coal Country, Mercer County, West Virginia. And their buses are not big, fancy buses. Some of us in Broward and Palm Beach, we got the, whatever they're called, the articulated this and that bus. They're literally little vans. But if they didn't exist, there would be no ability for these people to get to work or school. And so rural communities are left behind as well. So it's exciting. The money is already moving. We've received, I think we're up to, a lot of money. We've received it for the port. We have a number of grants that we've gotten on the Safe Routes to School. We're expecting a decision on reconnecting communities. But the money is moving. And I'm very impressed. It's been less than a year. And by the way, the RAISE grants, they've not only awarded them all, they're ready for next year's applications. They're going out in January. So if you haven't applied for a RAISE grant, get your act together. It's going to be released in January. So it's exciting. I think USDOT has done a great job on that.
There's a lot of folks in the room from Florida, but for the folks that are outside of Florida, I'm kind of curious about the government structure and the importance of the county and the county commission in the state, because I think it's different than a lot of other states. It feels like, anyways.
I can just tell you what we are in our county,
yes.
Right? Our county has 3 million people, more or less, in it. About half of our people live in cities, and the other half live in what we call unincorporated. So the county is their city. We pick up their garbage. Very important. We are their police department. We are their fire department. So we are literally their city. By the way, we have the lowest taxes in the county you want to live in unincorporated from a tax perspective. But we also provide countywide services. We are water and sewer department. We run the airport. We run the seaport. And we run the long distance public transportation systems, including bus and transit. So our county plays an important role, but I also know through my work on the Florida Association of Counties that I think counties are very influential in Florida. A lot of the FDOT formula money, Florida Department of Transportation funding flows through counties, but I don't really know how different we are from other places because this is the only place I've ever been part of government. I've lived other places, but as a person, not as a government. So.
What surprised you most about the process for the South Busway? I'm sure that there's been a number of things that have popped up that surprised you or you were interested in finding out because it's a different project than any other project that Miami-Dade has done before. There must have been something that kind of popped out at you.
Actually, the hardest part about this project is the disappointment of some of our residents. They really wanted a train. And for years, elected officials had told them they were going to get a train. But these are the same elected officials that never bothered to understand the process. They probably wouldn't even know what the letters FTA stand for. They certainly don't understand the rating process. And they said, we're going to bring you a train. And they said it loud and clear. I mean, this was not like you might get a train. This is like you're getting a train. And when our TPO was forced, which is the MPO, I guess other places we just like calling it a TPO to be different. When our TPO was confronting the decision, we had two options. We could have voted for a train, which we knew FTA would never fund because the ridership was so low and the cost benefit was so out of whack, they would never have funded it. So we had the opportunity to basically mislead our residents and say, we're going to vote for a train, we're going to submit to the federal government, and 5 years later, they're going to reject this project. Or we took a very politically unpopular decision to build a world-class BRT system. It's going to be, I think, the longest or one of the longest all electric BRTs in the US. It's really going to be pretty fantastic. And we made that decision, and holy mackerel, the blowback from the residents was really strong and really angry. And Behrman, I had lived in Mexico City, so I had ridden bus rapid transit to work. I thought it was fantastic. It's an above ground subway, but I get to see. I'm not in the dark. And so I'd ridden it for many years. So for me, I just thought this was a great solution. When it's built, people are going to love it. But we don't in this country yet have an extensive BRT network. I think we're getting there. We're getting there so that more people are going to have experiences with what bus rapid transit means, and they're going to know what I know. It's an above ground subway. You know, it never stops at a red light because we don't let it stop at a red light. We change the lights. It's also quieter than trains, right? Trains, I live near it. Trains are loud. Try the L in Chicago. I hope no one from Chicago's here. It's loud. So, but that's been the hardest part, is to still manage some residents, and over time they've come around, but some of them are still heartbroken, right? They feel cheated, and they really were misled by folks that didn't figure out, we did not upzone this area, right? It was all single family housing. For 40 years, if we were going to build a train, we needed to have the land use place done 40 years ago, right? So you can't just have empty land and say to FTA, hey, we're going to, would you mind giving us $2 billion, right? This is a lot of money, by the way, we were asking for to build this thing where there's no apartments and no jobs. They're not going to say yes because they have other projects in other parts of the United States that compete. So our residents were misled. Our board, or, enough of us were brave enough to vote for BRT, and now it's under construction. And I personally believe it's going to transform the southern part of our county. I feel good that I made the right decision to bring transit solutions to people that have long lacked without that. But there are also people that continue to not like me very much for it.
Are there any lessons from that you're going to take to future corridors?
Yes, I actually think our commission, so it's very different. We've had term limits for the very first time ever. And so we're having change on our commission, and we're getting a new generation of commissioners who are much more transit focused. When I first got onto the commission, there were really only 2 commissioners, myself being the second one. And I was a novice. I already told you all I knew was how to ride transit. I don't know how to build it. Now I know how to build it. But 4 years ago, I didn't. But it was me and one other, the chair of our county commissioner, Steve Bovo. But we were the only 2 that really could explain the whole process and really, go dig deep. That's changed. I now have there's probably 3 or 4 of us. And then we are getting new commissioners. Actually, Tuesday, we'll have our final batch elected on election day. And for example, one of them who is probably going to win, it's never over till it's over, but he and his wife are a 1-car family, which I know from other parts of the country. I mean, that is like a miracle in Miami-Dade County, right? That's a real commitment to using transit. So we're moving differently, and I think we're able to explain this better to our residents. And quite frankly, on our North Corridor, we've had no problems with those municipalities upzoning because they saw what happened on the South Corridor. When they didn't allow density, they didn't get a train, and these people want a train, and they've helped us put the land use in place. So it hasn't been that back and forth. It's like, we get it. We're going to let you build housing and commercial spaces near the transit. So we're getting better. I think we're getting better.
Okay, so set the scene. The line opens in 2024. What's going on? What's happening? Is it exciting? Is it something that catalyzes more funding for transit in the county?
Yeah, I think so. I think Florida City, Homestead, these folks are dramatically interested in doing this. They're building their own, by the way, with their own funding, affordable housing and workforce housing near these stations already. So I think when we open, we're probably going to have tens of thousands of new housing units down there, and all these folks will be able to ride. At the same time, we're extending our Metro Mover over to Miami Beach, to our Bay Link project that we call it. I might even have that one broken ground.
Oh.
We probably, maybe we'll still be designing it, but close. 2024, I don't know if it'll be early 2024, end of 2024. We should be breaking ground on that. I would anticipate by then we'd have a decision from FTA through the Infrastructure and Jobs Back on the North Corridor through the reconnecting approving. So we literally could have, 3 lines, 1 open, 1 under construction, 1 in the funding pipeline, and then with our friends over here, we're doing a quick build BRT pilot program on Flagler Street before we convert it. We're doing it kind of with paint and this and that. We got a lot of space that we don't have right-of-way issues. So we're going to do a quick, fun thing on Flagler Street pretty much by next year, right? Am I overcommitting us? Yes, I'm good. No, all right. So maybe. All right. This is good to be with the people that are building it. You can push them. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. So we're doing a quick build. See, again, this is a really innovative idea. Like, FDOT said, let's do a quick build and let's just do it, prove that it works. And then in the meantime, we'll work on the bigger project, which will bring BRT all the way out to FIU, which is my dream, because who builds a college campus of 100,000 people and doesn't put public transportation? Welcome to Florida. Anyway, we got to fix that. So our residents feel like we haven't done anything for 20 years because we haven't. But in the next 5 years and by 10 years, we're going to have this system built out. We have the funding identified. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act gives not just Miami-Dade County hope, but counties all across America hope that we can finally build the transportation systems we need.
And thanks for joining us. The Talking Headways podcast is a project of The Overhead Wire and published first at Streetsblog USA. Thanks to our wonderful Patreon supporters for sponsoring this week's show and Mondays at The Overhead Wire. Find us at patreon.com/TheOverheadWire. And you can sign up for our 16-year-old newsletter at theoverheadwire.com. And you can also listen to our show on your podcatcher of choice, including Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. And if you can't find it there, you can always find its original home at usa.streetsblog.org. We'll see you next time at Talking Headways.